Now that all the information regarding Kylo Ren, Ben Solo is out, I thought it would be beneficial to paint a clearer picture about why he chose to go to the dark side and then come back to the light. Not everyone reads comics and the books, etc., so that's where I come in, to aggregate all that information in order to hopefully fully explain the story of Kylo Ren. I also will be breaking this up into 2 videos. Part 1 will be us looking at the point of view of Ben Solo and what led him to feel that the persona of Kylo Ren was his only option as a young man. And Part 2 will focus on the sequence of events that led Kylo Ren back to the light, embracing his former identity of Ben Solo. So, starting off, I think The Rise of Kylo Ren did a very good job at giving us Ben Solo's side of the story and his point of view on things, which, in my eyes, are highly relatable. And I don't mean relatable in the sense that if somebody pisses us off, then we murder them with a lightsaber. If this is the case for you, talk to somebody. I think Ben Solo's self-loathing, isolation, depression, feelings of pressure living up to expectations, and feelings of abandonment are what is relatable about him. My biggest takeaways from the comic run was that Ben Solo literally felt like his existence was some kind of tug of war with the Force, as if the light and dark were always pulling at Ben to fulfill its own desires, leaving him without a say in the matter, basically a man without a choice. And what drove Ben into becoming Kylo Ren boiled down to his desire of becoming the master of his own destiny, and his desire to become his true self. But of course, a healthy portion of this is all steeped in manipulation. The other takeaway, which becomes obvious in issue 1 of The Rise of Kylo Ren, is that Ben Solo is seemingly innocent in regards to the destruction of Luke's Jedi Academy, but he paid the price either way. And I think had Luke's remaining students acted like true Jedi, things would have turned out a lot differently. In my opinion, there are 4 or 5 circumstances that set Ben on the path towards the dark side. The first thing is that Ben Solo is the child of the rebellion, the child of war heroes, and named after a highly regarded Jedi of the Old Republic.
You know him? Well, of course I know him. He's me.
Luke's former master and a friend of the Organa family. The weight of legacy is an extreme burden for young Ben Solo, and it's something he seemingly doesn't talk to anyone about beyond one friend whose name is Ty, who trained alongside him at Luke's academy. Luke Skywalker looked at his nephew Ben Solo as a new chosen one, with his mighty Skywalker blood. And since his parents named him after Obi-Wan Kenobi, a person who was well known in galactic history, Ben felt obligated to live up to his namesake, to be just like old Ben Kenobi, this famous Jedi. Even the origin of the Solo family name frustrated Ben because it's not Han's true last name, making Ben feel like everything he knows is veiled in lies. And as I will discuss, he wasn't exactly far from the truth. The core of this is that Ben Solo felt like he was merely a set of expectations, a legacy. He firmly believed no one looked at him as a person. No one looked at Ben as Ben. Ben wanted people to see him for who he was, not for what he should be. The second set of circumstances is Ben Solo's position within the Force itself. Ben has the blood of the most powerful Jedi and Sith in his veins. All of Ben Solo's life, he had felt this inner war of sorts between the light and dark side of the Force. And Ben, during his final confrontation before turning into Kylo, tells his former friend Ty that the moment he was born, the dark side and light claimed him for their own. And this is true looking back on the story. Leia and Luke looked to Ben as the next generation of Jedi Knights, and Ben was Luke's best student, which went straight to Ben's head. And we now fully understand that Palpatine was carefully using Snoke to pull Ben into darkness in such a way that it never even appeared nefarious. Snoke presented himself as a friend and confidant for Ben when he couldn't talk to anyone else about what he was feeling inside, and this relationship between Snoke and Ben was seemingly way more intimate than Anakin and Palpatine, and it was kind of creepy. Because of this secret relationship, Snoke was able to manipulate the way Ben thought not only about himself and his family, but about the Force, the Jedi, and who Ben could become if he became his true self, which again is playing off Ben's insecurity over his identity. The third circumstance is the fact that Ben's own family kept the truth about Vader a secret, believing that eventually when the time was right, they would tell Ben about Anakin's fall to the dark side as well as his return to the light. How in the end, the son saved the father, and the father saved the son. All Ben Solo knew as a young man was that Luke was a legend for defeating the Emperor and helping free the galaxy, but nothing about Anakin's true history. The primary reason Ben even began his training with Luke was predicated on the fear that Ben may turn out exactly like his grandfather. And that fear was based on Ben's early life at home, specifically during tantrums when his raw strength in the Force would cause accidental damage in the house, frightening his parents. And in those moments, Han and Leia thought of Ben as a monster, something which stuck with him all the way through the films.
You are a monster.
Yes, I am.
The worry about Ben following in the path of his grandfather is without a doubt a logical worry to have, but the main problem is how Ben Solo found out about all of this stuff. And while it's not explicitly stated who the individual was who told Ben about the family secret, I would bet that Snoke was the person that told Ben, most likely using this as proof that Ben's family feared he would become as powerful as Vader, and that if they keep information like this from their own flesh and blood, how can Ben possibly trust them anymore? And in case you never read Bloodline, this event happened when Ben Solo was 23 years old. It was 1 year before his true fall to the dark side. For me, I find this all tragically ironic. The very pursuit of trying to stop Ben from becoming like Vader propelled Ben to go further down the path of becoming just like Vader. However, there is the odd wrinkle in canon which states that Snoke indirectly inspired Luke to rebuild the Jedi Order, so perhaps right from the very beginning, this was all a grand plan, regardless of what Ben found out or didn't find out. Knowing that Snoke knew both Leia and Luke, and the fact Leia passionately tells Han that it was Snoke who twisted their son to the dark side, I think Ben came to trust Snoke more so than his own family. After all, when everything completely goes to hell at the Jedi Academy, Ben flees to his one friend left in the entire galaxy, Supreme Leader Snoke. The fourth circumstance regarding Ben's turn to the dark side is one that we all know about, which would be the fated confrontation in Ben Solo's hut when Luke considered striking him down. And I say fated because the comic run lets us know that this situation was something that both Ben and Snoke thought may happen one day, most likely after the events of learning about Vader. And when Ben woke up to an ignited lightsaber over his body, sensing Luke's fear and his intent, Ben did the only thing that he could do, which was protect himself. Snoke was apparently right all this time, at least in Ben's eyes. Although we know Luke felt shame in that moment, Ben only knew the fear for his life at the hands of his uncle. Snoke made Ben believe that Luke feared how powerful he would become, but the reality is, Luke saw a vision of Kylo Ren, and of all the death caused at his hands. After Ben saved himself from what he thought was Luke's killing blow, matters only got worse on this specific night because some entity, as I will call it, but most likely it was Palpatine or Snoke, or the dark side itself, caused the Jedi Temple to explode. Ben even stated to himself that he never wanted the entire temple and everyone else inside destroyed, but that dark voice inside of his head tells him that he didn't choose this, the Jedi did. In my eyes, Snoke or Palpatine made sure the temple would explode after Ben seemingly destroyed Luke on purpose. The reason being is Ben wouldn't be able to reasonably explain himself to the other remaining Jedi, forcing him to flee into Snoke's hand. Ben would be without any other option, once again, without a choice. And when Luke's remaining 3 Jedi arrive at the burning temple, they engage Ben Solo, refusing to believe his account with Luke, believing he merely murdered Luke. The only Jedi who gives Ben some room to explain himself is Ty, his former friend. But regardless, the Jedi pursue Ben across the stars, seeking revenge for the death of Luke Skywalker. Had these Jedi acted like real Jedi, they would have never engaged Ben in the way they did. What's interesting to me is jealousy fueled the primary engagement. Jealousy over who Ben Solo was, being Luke's prized student. At least that's what Ben thought. And when I said that Ben's skill in the Force went to his head, it's because of that information regarding being the best student that Luke had. Although Ben Solo was heavily conflicted in the Force, he had immense control and skill in the Force to such a degree that it annoyed some of his peers, specifically Vo. And as explained in the Force Awakens novelization, Ben Solo was kind of like this focal point in the light and dark. And because of his unique position in the Force, it allowed the Force to flow through him more freely, and it gave him immense raw strength in the Force. And Snoke, or Palpatine, was, secretly coveting this aspect of Ben most of all. Looking back, that makes perfect sense because the Sith Eternal Cult and Palpatine wanted Kylo to be groomed as the perfect heir to the Sith throne. Now, the last important bit about how Ben became Kylo is the name itself, Kylo. For a long time, we were all curious as to what exactly Kylo means. We now understand that Ren means whoever leads the Knights of Ren and whoever wields a lightsaber, which they called Ren. But Kylo remained an enigma. Traditionally, it would seem that it would have been a name given to him once he chooses the dark side, like an honorary title, but it's actually something far more personal than that. And it's also a little disturbing, I think. Ben Solo created the name Kylo for himself as a child, and it is Skywalker and Solo combined in a way, but it's also a dismissal of his heritage as well. Ben cuts away most of who he is, leaving himself with Kai and Lo to create his own unique name. As a young man, Ben didn't fully understand why he desired this name, but he felt that on a deep level it represented something about himself. After Luke's betrayal towards Ben Solo, Snoke and Ben discussed his potential future path with the Knights of Ren, but that they will reject Ben as the Jedi and expect his true self. Snoke tells Ben that his name that he gave himself as a child is the truest representation of who he is and what he wants to do. Snoke tells Ben that it represents what he wants to cut away, what he wants to kill, and that maybe someday, if he does decide to call himself by this name, people will come to see his true self finally. And again, Ben Solo struggles deeply with who he is, basically rejecting himself, so hearing that donning this name makes Ben his true self, which Snoke tells Ben is also the way of the dark side, gives Ben the sense that he will finally be seen, he will finally get to be who he truly is. And one other thing, I think the primary reason that Kylo Ren took up Vader's quest of destroying the Jedi, after all of this stuff we learned from the comic and the rise of Kylo Ren, wasn't necessarily because of Snoke or Snoke's will, but because of what Luke had tried to do to Ben Solo. Finishing what Vader started has a lot of potential meanings, but in my opinion, it was Vader's desire to rule the galaxy and just snuff out the Jedi. In Kylo's case, snuffing out the Jedi was far more personal, because it was Luke who tried to kill him, Luke who finally pushed him over the edge, the last Jedi, and his own family. So this wraps up part 1 of my dive into why Ben Solo chose to become Kylo Ren and what he was going through, which ultimately led him down the dark path. Part 2 will be coming out in a few weeks while I keep up with my regular content, so be on the lookout for that when it goes live. And please remember to leave a like and subscribe if you are new here, as it does help the channel grow. May the Force be with you, and AT-AT is signing off.